Well, it doesn't look as though anyone else is coming, so might make a bit of time we can use later. I'm on my third computer to try to get this working today. There's more than one way to break it. I've written a new parser for HTML and XML. Yes, I know, there's plenty of them out there. And as with most things in my life, it all started with Excel. I wanted to scrape a web page, take the data out of it, put together a new XML file and a new HTML file, and all the things one normally does. Excel's got a DOM, so I thought this was going to be easy. Put the well-formed HTML into the DOM, and it'll do all the work for me. There's only one problem. Because this is for XML as well as HTML, and because this is Bill Gates, it really truly believes that if there's anything very slightly malformed, it returns undef, or the Excel equivalent of undef. And the fun starts when you find out bit by bit what Bill Gates' definition of malformed is. It includes that, for example, which is valid. It's actually part of the definition of the XML I'm generating. So, before you can use Bill Gates' DOM, you've got to have gone through your XML and removed anything like this. Or to put that another way, before you can use the parser, you must have parsed it. So I wrote my own, which I'll tell you all about some other time. I'm writing something else now that's using XML, HTML, all that good stuff. And I think TDD is a great idea. First heard about it at the first London Perl workshop that I came to a dozen or so years back, and I fell in love with it. And because I'm not very good at HTML, I want to use TDD for that. Put something in, pass it through, template, toolkit, dancer, all that stuff, and see whether what you get out is what you're expecting. And given that it's me writing it, there's often problems with it, and I don't want something that just says undef. I want something that can help me find where I've made my blunder. And then somebody says, well, you should try using Bootstrap for your HTML, and that means you need another level of tags in there somewhere, and all your previously working tests break. And I don't like that either. Well, when you want to do something, you start off searching. And the first thing I came up with was HTML Parser. Now, those of you who've listened to me before will know that I rant about documentation. And HTML Parser's got this as its synopsis, and it goes into a lot more detail in the docs, but it doesn't cover anything that isn't actually in this synopsis, like what you end up with, how to get data out. So I'm sure I could parse with HTML Parser, I just couldn't do anything with it. I couldn't find out how to. Next one was HTML Tree Builder, which does talk about getting stuff out of it. Traversing the tree. Doesn't tell you how in the HTML Tree Builder docs, but they point you to HTML elements. And that says we've got a traverse method. Isn't this wonderful? We're now getting somewhere. Until you go further on, and it says it's unnecessary and confusing. And points you to yet another set of documentation. Yak shaving, anyone? And this says you can write your own recursive sub. Isn't that nice and clear? No, it isn't. It's foul and opaque. First of all, I can't see why anyone would do what this is supposed to do. Second, I don't think it actually does what it says it's supposed to do. And third, I certainly can't hack that into something that gives me table 2, row 3, column 4, and make sure that I'm getting the right data out. So you ask Perl monks. There are a couple of dead ends there, but they put me onto XML XPath, and I very nearly got this working, and if I'd known more, I would have. And where I started stumbling was on these little bits here. How many tables have you got? Got 2. Great. How many rows are in the first table? I know there are 4. It says there are 8. And I couldn't get stuff out of the second table because it was all confused. Actually, there was a bug in my HTML, which had I known enough about XML XPath, I'd have found. But I didn't find that bug until I'd basically written my own anyway. I have sent off a bug report So I wrote my own, and this is the one I am going to tell you about. And it's not all singing, all dancing, it's not the finest parser out there in the world, but it is very, very liberal. It will give you answers. You can find out what's going on in there. It's object-orientated. I used moo, and the object has 4 parameters, 3 of which are just telling it what a tag looks like. What's the opening, what does the tag start with and end with, and what tells you that it's closing it. It's then got this array of what I've called verbatim tags, and these are things that you don't want it to look inside, because one of the things that I was hacking had a script in it, and there were things in there that looked like tags, but were bits that were going to make up tags when the JavaScript ran, and it confused me, let alone any parsers out there. So these are all configurable. You can put your own array of tags in there, and it will ignore what you tell it to ignore. The method I use most often, and that I copied shamelessly from my own Excel parser, I've called within. 3 parameters. We'll come on to indexing later, because I've done something rather strange there that certainly entertains me. You give it some markup language and a tag that you're looking for, and there's only one tag you're looking for. Anything else it will ignore. It'll treat as plain text. If you've got it mismatched, if you've got any unclosed tags, it will assume they're closed at the end of the markup language. I've used an awful lot of regexes in here, but I'm not fool enough to think that regexes alone are enough to parse XML, HTML, etc. I build a stack, so yes, if you've got a closing tag, it is applied to the innermost open one first. We do get that right. Anything that's not your target tag, as I say, that is just plain text. So if you've got this little bit of tag soup here with the standard implementation of the object, so that pre is one of your verbatim tags, and therefore anything within that gets ignored. If you throw that as your ML and say what's within a Z tag, it'll return ASDF. Now, if you didn't have the verbatim tags operating on pre, it would give you XCF/pre YZ ASDF. But that initial Z tag that's in the pre tags, it will ignore, because pre tags are verbatim tags. You could be documenting what it does and then using it. And because I've been playing around with XPath and rather liked what I'd seen, I wrote a wrapper around within, which I've called WPath. It is not a full implementation of XPath. It never was meant to be. It just, for those who are familiar with XPath, it does rhyme. It's far freer in format. So, for example, I've got 80 lines odd of tag soup, and you can either give it a full-scale XPath, as in the first example there, or you can just say tbody, tr2, td2, and skip all the long stuff. And that's nice because, going back to what I was talking about earlier, if you put in another layer of tags, it won't care. You can also do some seriously improper things after that first square bracket in each of the indices. Now, the index that you give any of these methods is always optional. And because I'm copying XPath, it's one-based. And I know that the Perl people here aren't going to like that, but the XPath people here might. So I wrote a test to see what would happen if I started being naughty and used a 0 index, and it worked just like Perl. So I've got tests that never generated any code because magic happened. And then I started being even sillier and putting in negative numbers, and it still worked just like Perl, so -1 gave me the last element that I was looking for. And I was as smug as a cabinet minister, because I finally found a use case for saying that 0 equals 1. By the way, undef, 0 strings, and that, all just taken as being 0 or 1, or whatever you want to call it. One that I hadn't written for my Excel parser was tag val. Now, within obviously gives you what is between an opening tag and a closing tag. Tag val gives you what's inside a tag itself. So, for example, with this little bit of code, if you said what's within A, you get back click. But if you say what's the tag val of A, it will give you href example.com. Inner text I use all the time. This is one that's really for these things where people add tags or change the nature of the tag even. It just goes through calling within recursively until it finds something that isn't a tag. And then it gives you what was within the last one that it's tried. So here I've got 4 X tags. If they were X, Y, Z, and T, it would still work just the same way. It would give me ASDF. If it's not tagged at all, it'll give you whatever's in there because it starts with the first non-tag text it finds.
Does it just give you the first elements, contents that it finds, or does it concatenate if you've got multiple ones?
Inner text goes to where non-tag text starts, so in this case ASDF. If that were ASDF /T, ASDF T, some more text /T, then yes, it would give you to the end of that tag, it would give you to the end of the closing T tag. Because as soon as it finds non-tag text, it gives it from there to within whatever it has last opened. So here it's got 4 X's, so it will give you whatever's within that 4th X. Or if it were X, Y, Z, T, it will give you whatever's within the T. Clear?
So it doesn't back up one level and give siblings. So if you had Y, then
no, if you wanted that, you'd say X3 Y in a W path or something like that. Or nest your withins. This is the one method that does not return text. All of these, by the way, return text, 0-length string if you've given it something dud. Tag count actually gives you a number. So in this example here, you've got 4 div tags and you've got no X tags. How do you use it in practice? Well, this was a recent query on Perl Monks. Somebody's got this tag soup and wanted to get out. In his question, he said height misspelt, not his doing, not mine, width and description. In the text, in the code that he wrote, he was only going for the description. So we're looking for property tags. In the first case, it's the description type. How many tags have we got? We've got 6. Let's look back at that. It's got 2 nodes, as he calls them, each with 3 properties. So 6 tags of 6 property tags in total. Loop through them, and that first if statement, if the val, which is type equals description, is the tag val of the current tag that we're looking at, then we're interested in it. So on that one, you get the index, which is 3, and the tag val, which I think is smile, yes, followed by index 6, tag, index 3, contents smile, index 6, contents background.jpg. The solution that he was given using the module that he actually wanted to use, I didn't post this because it was the module that he wasn't asking about, gives all 6 tags, 1 height, whatever that might be. Yeah, 1 height is 434, 2 width is 2346, 3 description smile. Now I put this up to the London Perl Mongers a few months back, earlier in the year, and said, is this worthy of CPAN? And I was told yes. So I tried to release it to CPAN. And I have succeeded in doing that, but only after various fights, because you go to cpan.org, there's nothing that tells you how to put something up. They do point you to pause, and that has an about page. Now, it does have a section on uploading, which talks all about the importance of version numbers. It doesn't tell you how to upload. So I think there's an awful lot of stuff that could well be documented here, because I don't know what files are needed. I still don't. I've released the distribution, and I don't know what's needed. So if there's something missing there, please shout at the people who wrote these things. Because I got an answer on how to upload, not necessarily the answer. And I was advised to use Distiller Miller, and that is what I ended up using vaguely successfully. But all of these things make the same rather large assumptions. They all assume that before you even start coding, you know you're going to release this to CPAN. I certainly didn't. I wrote this for me and then asked London Perl Mongers, and they said, yeah, let's have it. They are very, very Unix-centric, Linux-centric, call it what you will. I'm an accountant, I speak Windows. I don't like it. But I know it, and I don't know Linux. And when I came to write an update, I had the devil's own job trying to untangle that ink, making sure that it worked the usual way most of the time, and not the usual way when I was trying to write a new version of the thing that's already in Perl sitelib or wherever it is. Anyway, I got it up and I announced it on Perl Monks, and I got some very useful feedback. I was told to use devel cover, which I've tried to use in the past and haven't been able to fathom out the docs. But this time I was shown how to use devel cover. And it told me that I was using some unnecessary tests. I was testing for undef stuff coming in, and I'd already made sure before then that it couldn't be undef, so I didn't need that, and it cut it out. What I wasn't terribly impressed by was that it was complaining that I wasn't testing modules that I was using. What was happening was I was passing in parameters to methods using method signatures, which makes sure that I've got the right number of parameters. And devel cover was saying, you're not testing that you've got the right number of parameters. No, I know I'm not. That's what I've used method signatures for. Anyway, complaints about that, so coverage is less than 100%, quite right too. The other thing that I was advised was that I needed a changes file. Hold on, this is version 1.0.0, there aren't any changes.
There will be.
Oh, there are now. There are now, and there is a changes file, and I have put a changes file up, but I will confess that I do not like it, because I do not like having one file that documents changes and another file that documents the module. I don't like having documentation spread all over the place, because that ends up with the sort of yak shaving exercise that I've been crying on your shoulders about so far. And if I find it in your modules, yes, I'll cry on your shoulders again. That's what I've done. Any questions?
Could you tell us how many tests you had to write?
60 something, I think.
Okay.
Not, yeah?
How broken is the XML or HTML that you're parsing? You seem to have quite a few workarounds for things that are, wouldn't be there in valid XML.
It's all for stuff that's not invalid. The stuff that I'm parsing by the time I've finished writing it is perfect. But when I'm developing it, it's, shall we say, marginal. I don't get it right first time every time. And some of the stuff that I've found, well, as I said with that example from Bill Gates, it does depend on your definition of valid. And I have come across some HTML that I've been downloading that has been a bit broken. Not horrendously, but sort of X, Y, close Y. That sort of minor stuff up that people can make if they're coding in a hurry. Most stuff out there is pretty good.
It seems like you've added some features to make up for gaps in XPath that as far as I can tell, you could do with XPath.
It could be my understanding. But yes, because I struggled, because I had something working in VBA and Excel, I don't know how long it would have taken me to sort out my misunderstanding of XPath without this or something very like it. But yeah, it is there to deal with broken stuff. Because I can break anything. And if you want to criticize my docs, you can be as brutal as you like, because I don't believe anybody does a good job of documenting their own code. I think it's too difficult. But I'd love to hear. And I make that exactly half past.